Life has a way of telling us what we should do, what we should have, and who we should become. But what if that's not the point? What if the life we build for ourselves is supposed to look completely different? Is it possible to gain everything that the world has to offer, only to discover that it leaves you longing for a different life? Something deep inside our souls, the very fiber of our being, longs to be set free, to be unleashed into a world of adventure and risk. Stepping into the unknown can be one of the most intimidating decisions we can make, but it can also be the very thing that sets us free. It's time to burn the boats of expectation, security, and ease for a life lived differently. The life we know we are called to explore.
In 1519, conqueror Hernando Cortez heard about the world's greatest treasure and he wanted to go after it. But what made this treasure so unique and special is that it had been guarded by the same army for over 600 years. Cortez, though, he didn't need the money, but he wanted the glory, he wanted the adventure, and he wanted to go down in history as one of the greatest conquerors of all time. So he gathered hundreds of men, a fleet of ships, and he knew this trip would be huge. He knew it was going to be tough. But Cortez was smart. You know, he knew he was gonna have to really sell the vision of this conquest to his men. And so partway on the way there, you know, his men came to him and they were full of doubts. They said, we should turn back, we shouldn't do this. But he kept telling them, no. We are making history. You are going to change your family's lives and your family's lives forever. This is worth the risk. This is worth it. And so eventually they land on the beach. But like every other army before them, as soon as they landed, they went after this treasure. But Cortez was smart. He said, no, wait. And finally, the day comes when they are gonna go try to take this treasure. And Cortez brings his men together. They're ready to hear how they're going to take the treasure. But Cortez says 3 words: burn the boats. And he points to their boats. I mean, put yourself in this situation for a moment. Your commander, he just told you to burn your boats. Why would he do that? Cortez had his mind set that there was no backup plan. There was no plan B. And that if we win, we are going home in their boats. Because if you don't burn the boats, you will always be tempted to run back. Hey, have you ever been all in like that? Have you ever had something happen in your life that just empowers you, invigorates you, makes you come alive like never before? Maybe it's a new job, new career. Maybe you changed your major in school, or if you are married, if you've ever been married in a long-term relationship, everyone knows there comes a stage. It's called obsession.
It's just simply everything you think about is that person. And I remember this whenever I was dating my wife, Kelsey. Well, before she was my wife. You all get where I'm going. And before she was my wife. And I remember like this morning, this one morning, having recognized, like, I think it's time for me to go all in, because if I don't screw this up, I'm gonna marry this woman. And at that point, it was like the entire universe sunk into my chest. I mean, it was the startling realization that saying yes to Kelsey meant that I was saying no to any other woman in the world. That's a big deal. And I knew I wanted to be all in, but like it just hit me. It was crazy. So I took a deep breath and I just prayed. And I just prayed. I was like, God, just give me peace. And I got that peace. And I walked away from that prayer and I knew she's gonna be my wife. I know it. And that is the essence, that is the heart of our new series, Burn the Boats. It is about going all in. There is no plan B, no turning back, because a long time ago, in the world of exploration and conquest, what is the best way to motivate your army to win? You get rid of your way out, right? And so burning the boats serves as that purpose. So get rid of the backup plan. You go all in. We will win or we will die trying. And I knew that morning, I was so young. I was 23, and I knew at that time that it was time for me to put other things on hold. It was time to burn the boats, so to speak. Go all in to Kelsey before my next birthday. We got married before my next birthday. That's what happens when you go all in. There's just something so compelling and makes you come alive when you find what God has for you next. Do you all ever feel like that? You ever have that experience where things are just happening in your life and it's time to go all in, but there are things that try to hold you back, right? There are plenty of things that distract us and keep us from doing great things for God and with God. And so we are going to spend the next couple of months or so walking through one of my favorite books of the Bible, the book of Galatians. The book of Galatians. It is a letter written by the Apostle Paul to the church in Galatia, and it is truly a brilliant defense of the message of Jesus, of the gospel. And I heard one pastor put it this way. He said, if you are a Christian, two of the most important books of the Bible you can read for your own understanding of the gospel and growing in your theology is Romans and Galatians. So if we are a coach of a team, I'm a recovering sports junkie myself, so I love analogies like this. If you're not, you will still get it, I promise. So if you are in charge of the team, if you want to win at all, you have to have a great offense and a great defense. Are you guys Lions fans or something? What's going on? You're kind of bitter. It's like the refs made some bad calls on Monday Night Football. Sorry. We're here to have fun at church, not be in misery. So great offense and a great defense. Romans is your offense. The gospel is love. It is grace. It is mercy. It is compassion. It is Jesus. The gospel is very offensive. At times a little offensive, but mostly it's so offensive. Galatians, which we are going to be walking through, Galatians is your defense. The gospel isn't this. The gospel isn't that. Do not compromise the gospel. Do not trust a counterfeit gospel. There's the gospel of Jesus, and that is it. Nothing else matters. And so, if you are the person here today and you are growing with God, then you obviously are taking notes. And so if you're taking notes, I got a title for this message for you. The title is honestly, it's a math equation, but it's easy, okay? Even I can get it. I was in math 095 in college, and even I can understand this equation, okay? Ready? Jesus plus Jesus plus, that's it. That's all I got for you, okay? I'm simple, I'm from Kentucky, remember? Jesus plus, I can make that joke, you can't. Jesus plus. And we're gonna talk about what that means as we go through, but let's jump into Galatians chapter 1. And we are actually going to start our time in verse 6. Just so you know, the reason we're skipping verses 1 through 5 is because Paul is essentially introducing and saying hello to the church in Galatia. Whereas if you are writing a letter, you simply say, Dear Jay. That's really all you would say. That's all I would say. And honestly, who writes letters anymore other than boomers? But anyway, Paul took 5 verses. Some of you get that. Paul took 5 verses to write Dear Jay, and I'm just telling you that's all it is. So verse 6 though, he drops the clutch and hits the gas pedal. He goes all in right here. Remember, think defense, the defense of the gospel. Here it is, verse 6. Paul writes, I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting him who called you. Paul is talking about himself. I called you in the grace of Christ. You are turning to a different gospel. Verse 7, not that there is another one, but there are some who trouble you and want to distort the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed. As we have said before, so now I say it again. If anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you received, let him be accursed. This is the best defensive strategy you could take. Bill Belichick should take this right here. But verse 10. For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? Ooh, that kind of hits too close to home. We'll get to that in a moment. If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. And so here is a little bit of the background. Paul showed up sometime before this. He preached Jesus. Things were good. People were coming to Jesus, and it was a beautiful time. He saw people come to Christ. He put others in charge of the church. They baptized a ton of people, and he said, take care of it. Preach Jesus. And he left. And so then Paul gets word that there are some religious people who have come into the church. And he's like, not today. And so he starts this letter. And he writes because these religious people showed up with a combination of religious tradition and cultural opinion. And these people said, hold on, there's actually a new and improved gospel. Listen, I'm gonna say this a lot today, so I need your help. But listen, Jesus plus anything ruins everything. Jesus plus anything, it ruins everything. That is what Paul is telling them. So Paul, man, in verse 6, he goes in on him. He is livid that the church is ditching the gospel, the message of Jesus. They're listening to a bunch of false teachers tell everyone that Jesus is not enough. They are presenting a counterfeit gospel. They're presenting something that is simply fake. And so listen, when people try to do this, when they try to add to Jesus, I think they believe they're helping God out, but they're not. God doesn't need help. He's God. He doesn't need our help. It's as if they think that there is a way to improve the gospel or that it needs updating. I mean, how many of you have apps on your phone, right? Yeah, we have apps on our phone. And if you're like me, you neglect those updates, but eventually you got to do it, right? Okay, but there are updates. Anyone ever update that software? Yeah. We update it all the time. Well, listen, the same principle applies because there's no update needed for the Bible. God got it right on the first try. The Bible talks about an eternal gospel. Simply put, the Bible is like math. It doesn't change. Praise God, it is not like algebra or calculus, but even a dumb guy like me can understand it. It's like math. It simply doesn't change. And so it was, I guess I was in college, and I worked at a bookstore. And I remember my manager, he's training me, and I'm learning, the register and things like that. And he tried to put the fear of God in me. And he said, I remember he put his hand down on the table, and he said, never accept counterfeit money. I was like, ugh. I don't remember if he said I would lose my job or not, but I felt that, some things are just kind of said with your eyes. It's like, I felt that. Like it was nuts. It was crazy. And he just stared at me. And I was like, okay. But in my head, I'm just like, crap. Because that's how I cuss. And I was like, crap. How do I know if I have counterfeit money? How do I know? And so I had a friend of mine. He tried to come in and literally use counterfeit money. I know, some friend, right? I know, some friend. But he thought like he could use it, and if he got caught, that I'd be cool with it. And I remember I was like, no, dude, I can't do that. And all of a sudden, he drops me, and I don't hear from him anymore. That was obviously counterfeit money, counterfeit friendship. I'm not bitter. I moved on, and here we are. And so listen, how do we know? How do we know the difference between money that is genuine and money that is counterfeit? If you spend enough time with what is genuine, then you'll know when you encounter something counterfeit. It's like one of the 2 times I think I get on Facebook in a week. All-time high this week, I got on like 4 times. It was nuts, But every time I'm on, I have these like friend requests come in. And I can always tell, like I get a spam, friend request. Like you get these sometimes. And I think it's pretty easy to figure out what is spam and what isn't. And usually it has a profile photo that kind of looks like this. I couldn't show you because it's always inappropriate. Like, come on. But listen. I always hit delete. I always hit ignore, whatever. But every now and then I notice under the name, the obvious fake name, it says one mutual friend, a few mutual friends. So listen, I gotta laugh at some of y'all because I gotta see who fell for this, who actually thought this was a real friend request. And listen, men, it's usually you, because a friend request is an inappropriately dressed woman. And listen, I'm telling you, she's not trying to add you on Facebook. You're getting scammed, and your pastor's kind of judging you a little bit. I'm gonna check on your heart later, okay? But listen, I can tell a difference. Because genuine Facebook pages are usually filled with, pictures of family. Again, guys, you all have a tendency of making your profile photo a car. What are you, a transformer? I don't know. But again, that kind of seems like a genuine Facebook account. There's usually your political opinions that I don't really care about. That's how I know it's a genuine Facebook account, right? But sometimes I encounter what's fake. Or have you ever received a scam call? And when you listen to the voicemail, or if you're the ridiculous person that actually answers weird numbers, then you hear it's like they're talking in all caps. If you do not reply within 48 hours, you are subject to penalty of $5,000 or time in jail. Like I could go on and on and on about counterfeits. But my point, and what I think the Apostle Paul's point is simply this: when you spend enough time with Jesus, you know what's counterfeit. When you spend enough time in the Bible, when you spend enough time in church, when you spend enough time serving alongside your brothers and sisters inside the church, when you spend enough time in life group, when you spend enough time in worship, when you spend time with God, it's easy to recognize what's counterfeit. It's easy, actually. And so anything or anyone who attempts to add something to the gospel makes it counterfeit. Jesus plus anything ruins everything. And just so we are all on the same page here, remember, Jesus plus anything ruins everything. But another true statement is this: Jesus plus nothing is salvation. Jesus plus nothing is salvation. But a false statement: Jesus plus something is salvation. And that's what Paul is dealing with in the book of Galatians. Because these overly religious people show up and they're saying, hey, Jesus, but something. And then you get to go to heaven. And listen, there are plenty of religions who claim to have the right gospel. They take Jesus and they add, and they think they have the truth, but they don't. They have a false gospel. They have a counterfeit. And so listen, we need to stop acting like some of these things are actually Christian. Like the Jehovah's Witnesses. They have added a whole new translation of the Bible plus a ton of additional teaching. And they actually say Jesus is the art archangel Michael in a created being. That's not Jesus. That's not Christian. I think of Mormonism. Mormons will add another book of the Bible, other books, more teaching. Jesus plus anything ruins everything. Jesus plus anything ruins everything. Islam, they take Jesus, they like Jesus, they just don't love Jesus. They like Jesus, they take Jesus, but then they add Muhammad because he's the greater prophet and the Quran is the greater book. Your salvation is all about what you do. That's not Christianity. That's not the gospel. And then Hinduism, you have to die to reincarnate because you owe God and you gotta continue to build on your karmic debt. That's not Jesus. Listen, I know a lot of our backgrounds are in this subject area. So I know I'm in dangerous water. But listen, even Catholics, some of whom love Jesus, but you have been told that after you die, you have to go to purgatory. That you have to pay God back a little bit. Jesus plus anything ruins everything. Jesus plus anything ruins everything. It's only Jesus. It's always Jesus. It's all about Jesus. If you want your soul saved, it's Jesus. And here is what I'm getting at, church. Here's what I'm getting at. Here it is. If you have ever felt burdened heavily by Jesus, I would argue that's not Jesus. Matthew 11, he simply says, my burden is light. Jesus came to lift burdens, not add. Jesus is genuine. And so in Galatians, these uber religious people were distorting the gospel. So the question becomes, what were they doing? Like, what were they saying that was so terrible? What was it? Does anyone know? Anyone know? I heard somewhere over here, very quietly, circumcision. Yes, you can say that out loud in church. It's okay. Yes. Yeah, so these religious people came into the church after Paul planted it, said, preach Jesus, do it all. The religious people came in and said, I mean, listen, that's fine and all. That's great. But if you want to go to heaven, you got to do this. They said Jesus plus circumcision is salvation. Okay, so those in that church at the time, they were literally told, it's great that you trust in Jesus, but if you want to go to heaven, you got to get circumcised. And believe it or not, people were doing this. Men were doing this. Like think about that for a moment. Think of circumcision for a second. Wait, no, don't think of circumcision for a second. Okay. Let's fix this. Let's fix this. Let me rephrase that. Think of it this way. There we go. These teachers were coming in and saying, get circumcised or go to hell. And honestly, if I'm in that church at that day, I'm like, I could go either way on that, honestly, at this point in my life. And so listen, we kind of laugh at that because it sounds ridiculous. Like really? But people still do this all the time today. They add to the finished work of Jesus all the time. And not so long ago, I began meeting, with a guy in our church. It seemed like he loved God. It seemed like he wanted to grow. And so we kind of started, I was kind of discipling him in a way, trying to help him take his next steps with God. But after, I guess, a month or so, I'll never forget, he came in and his head was down. And he just looked like he was so burdened. And so I asked him, hey, man, are you okay? What's going on? How can I pray for you? And he just was kind of being cold, when you can tell someone is just very turned off right now. And he was just being super cold to me. And then he simply said that there is only one true translation of the Bible. And that is the King James Version. And because I preach on the stage from the ESV, that I am leading people astray. And so I told him I'd like to argue with you about that because that's one of my spiritual gifts. And I said the King James is fine. The King James is fine. But we actually have a more accurate rendering of the scripture now based on the most recent manuscript evidence, but he simply wasn't hearing it. And then he changed the subject and he said, why don't you go out and street preach? Why don't you go out and do that? Why don't you go and convict people of their sin? And I simply said, I can't convict anyone of anything. That job's already filled. Okay, that's not mine to do. But he simply wasn't hearing it, church. And I continued to meet with him. I tried my best, but it was obvious that there was Jesus plus something. And eventually we had to part ways. And honestly, it still hurts when I think about him, when I think about his life. And see, he first learned about Jesus. He first learned about Jesus. But then he began to add to the finished work of Jesus. He added to the equation. Jesus plus anything ruins everything. And so listen, Jesus lifts burdens. He doesn't break you. Jesus heals you. He doesn't harm you. Jesus, he gives love. He gives grace. He gives mercy, not despair. It's not about me. It's not about you. That's just who he is. I also thought, this week, whenever I was a youth pastor, it was I feel like almost 10 years ago now. And I was young, but I was willing. And I tell Pastor Jeremy all the time, I'm still young, dumb, and willing, but that's just who I am, And so back then, I was young, dumb, and really dumb and willing. And so I was trying to lead this Bible study with these other students. And I'm trying to just teach them about Jesus. I was like, it's Jesus, that's the answer. But I noticed we're sitting in a coffee shop, just to kind of give you a visual. And I'm trying to lead these 3 young guys. And so we're talking about different things. And I noticed, we had our Bibles out, But I noticed these maybe 20-something, 30-something people were circling us. It was a guy and a girl. And our table is here. And I just noticed they're just circling. Like a couple of weirdos, honestly. But they're just circling. Okay, obviously I'm exaggerating, but But I was just like, what are they doing? And honestly, it reminded me of sharks. And I should have known, and I didn't. Young and dumb. And one of my students asked me about baptism. Hey, is that necessary for salvation? And as I began to talk about Jesus plus nothing is salvation, as I started to say no, it's like the sharks just came in and invited themselves in, and they tried to play dumb at first. And I think the guy kind of took the lead on this, and he said, hey, what is something you believe I'll probably disagree with you about? That kid was homeschooled, right? Come on. Oh, come on. We can laugh at that. And so I'm just like, all right, look, what a question. What a way to start. So I went with baptism because I figured he heard me start it, so why not finish it? And honestly, he kind of went in, on the whole thing. And I didn't know much back then, 10 years ago now. So by the end of it, all I could really come up with was he does this whole thing. And I'm like, so Jesus is in heaven, saying I don't like the dry ones, I only take the wet ones. And listen, now I know a little bit more about the cultural context and the nuance of the day and all that important stuff. But that was all I had at the time, and it kind of worked. I got rid of the sharks for a while. But here's the simplest way I'm trying to get this across to you. Here's the simplest way I can put it. The overly religious turn neutral things into necessary things. And we've all experienced that to a degree, right? Telling you that something is necessary when it is actually completely and totally neutral. So how else do we experience this today? Listen, sometimes we say some really stupid things. Pastor, I'm going to hold your hand, walk you through this, okay? But sometimes we say, well, real Christians, that's how you sound to me. Also, terrible way to start off a sentence. Real Christians, they only vote this way. Real Christians, they only think this way. They only believe this way. Real Christians only think the way I do. It's ridiculous. And so a long time ago, I guess it was 20 years ago, I'll never forget, my aunt told me just a terrible story. my family and I had tried to get her in church for a while. We were in a great Southern Baptist church, great community, great family. We were trying to get her to come, and she just always had an excuse, Like, oh, I walk the dog at 11 a.m. on Sundays. Shoot. And there was always an excuse. Well, it was the oddest thing, but she kind of opened up to me, her 9-year-old nephew, whatever. And she just shared about how she experienced like something pretty tragic years earlier. And she knew she needed to get into church. Like, praise God. She knew she needed to get right with God. You hear that language a lot. Like, oh, I gotta do these things, gotta do that. And so she shows up at a church, but she's young, she doesn't have much, and she just shows up in what she's wearing Sunday morning. And so what she's wearing is a Guns N' Roses t-shirt, and she's promptly escorted out of the church. That's wrong. That's taking something neutral and making it necessary. And to the best of my knowledge, from what I can tell, she is not walking with the Lord. I think a lot of it stems from the damage that people do when we take something that simply doesn't matter and we make it everything. Listen to me. There are non-essential issues and essential issues. But if we believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, then we are family, and we can lovingly and respectfully disagree. That is the truth. We are still family. I think it was a couple of Christmases ago, I tried to break from family tradition because the 24 hours of A Christmas Story was kind of getting on my nerves at this point. And so I'm like, you know what? No one's in the living room right now. I'm at my mom's house, it's like Kelsey and I and our 2 boys. And I'm like, you know what? No one's in here. I'm changing the channel. So naturally, I find another absolutely beautiful classic Christmas movie, Jurassic Park. And it was like a great 11-minute run that I had until family came in and saw what I had done. And you would have thought I told a vulgar joke. It was terrible. They couldn't believe I would do something like that. But listen. At the end of the day, we just kind of got over it. Family gets under your skin more than anyone else. But at the end of the day, we're still family. It was non-essential. We argued and yelled and threatened each other, but then we hugged. That's just what you do. And so listen, this is what I'm trying to say. If there are other churches who love Jesus, if there are other churches that preach Jesus, then it means we are family. We can disagree at times, but we always speak well of other churches, of one another. We cheer other churches on. We never speak bad of other believers because we do not compete for the people of Downriver. We complete one another for the people of Downriver. This is family, y'all. This is what we should be about. Oh, but they preach from that translation. Oh, but they do this, but they do that. Oh, the lights, oh, the hymns. Come on, give me a break. It's Jesus. As Christians, there are hills to die on, but there are hills to simply pass up. Knowledge and religion will tell us to die on every hill we encounter. Wisdom knows when to simply let it go. Wisdom knows when to fight and when to let it go. So now for most of this, I get it. I've been talking really to Christians, and I don't know that everyone here is a Christian. If you are not, I'm so glad you're here. But if this isn't a home for you, then please find a local church. Find me. I have plenty of churches in the area that I would love to plug you in. People who preach Jesus, love Jesus, and want you there. But if Metro is your home, then I just want to encourage you to serve, to invest, to give of your time and resources. Plug in, get involved. But maybe you are here and you're not a Christian. Maybe you're trying to figure out where you are with faith. I'm so glad you're here, okay? All of this still applies to you too, though. And I'm gonna prove this point by using fish, okay? And so listen, I listen to a whole lot of public radio, sometimes to my detriment, if I'm being honest. I can be having a good day, and then all of a sudden I hear a terrible story on the drive home. My wife is like, "How's your day?" I'm like, "Terrible. Do you know what's going on in the Amazon?" And she's like, like, what? Anyway, So all summer long, though, I hear about the fish in Lake Michigan, about specifically the invasive species, what's happening in Lake Michigan. And I realize it's a big deal. I kept hearing about this over and over and over and over. And so just so you know, if you are unaware, maybe you're not, Asian carp. They've long been recognized as a threat to the Great Lakes. I don't know if you knew this, but our Great Lakes region generates like $7 billion a year. That's like pretty significant. So I'm listening to the story on invasive species, and I hear this quote. This expert says, we're on the verge of an unstoppable crisis due to Asian carp. It's going to crash the economy. It's going to crash the environment and so on. And so I looked this up a little bit, and I found out that Asian carp are insatiable filter feeders. They eat almost 40% of their body weight every single year. And they spawn multiple times a year. Here's where I'm getting at. Invasive species remind me a lot of false religions. We have native fish here in Lake Michigan. There are invasive fish apparently coming to Lake Michigan. To the unaware and uneducated, they're all fish. What's the big deal? What's the difference? We treat Jesus the same exact way. Well, religion's a bicycle wheel. They all go to heaven. Jesus, he said just love your neighbor as yourself, so I don't do that. I don't do the church thing on the weekend, though. I don't do that. No. Didn't Buddha say some good stuff? I can do that. It's whatever. It's all the same. It all leads to God. What's the difference? To the unaware, it's just a bunch of fish. What's the big deal? Church, listen to me. It is a big deal. It is everything, because Jesus is everything. Jesus said himself, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. This is a big deal. This should matter to you. And so if you want sincere change in your life, it's Jesus. If you want to see miracles, it's Jesus. If you want to find the process of healing, it's Jesus. It's always Jesus. And you'll always hear that it's Jesus because it is. Jesus plus anything, though, ruins everything. So listen, let's finish strong today in verse 10. I touched on it earlier, but let's finish there. Let's land there, okay? Galatians 1:10 says, "For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." I think we all relate to this. And here it is. We care too much about what other people think. Let it hit you for a moment. You do. I don't care how young or old you are. If you have a family or not, if you're working or not, there are people in your life. You care too much what they think. And listen, we've talked about being uncompromising with the truth of the gospel, with the love of Jesus. And if you're a Christian, that should stir something within you. But something holds you back. What's that something? It's us, actually. It's us. We can try to blame other people for the life that we should have lived, but at some point, it's our responsibility to live beyond our suffering, to live beyond the opinions of others, and step into the greatness that God is calling you into. Are you seeking the approval of people, or are you seeking the approval of God? Because you will insult one or the other. Who is it? You will insult one of them. Who is it? I don't know about you, but I believe Christians should live life with a great purpose. They should live a life that matters. They should live a life that makes a difference, but most of us don't. Most of us play it safe. We get comfortable. We just settle for the backup plan. We have the plan that it was easier. We just fell back into it. I've never understood that concept, if I'm being honest. Young, dumb, willing. Chalk it up to that. But I've never understood the concept of a backup plan, of having something to fall back on. When I was studying early on, I was studying to be a history teacher. I was less than a year away from getting the teaching credential, being a history teacher, and all of that. But honestly, I wasn't doing it because I thought that's what I want to live and devote my life to. If that is you, God bless you. God bless you. But it wasn't mine. I was listening to the opinions of everyone else tell me, you'd make a great history teacher. And I thought, I love history. Sure, why not? But the moment I surrendered my life to God and I invited him into that area of my life, it looked insane to some, okay? So I dropped the teaching aspect of my degree. I still graduated, but it was with a useless degree in history. I graduated early. I walked away from the teaching credential, what a lot of people consider the smarter plan for me, and I embraced an internship at my local Vineyard church for $50 a week. I said, I'm all in. I know there's something going on inside of me, and I gotta be all in on this. And so I remember I was talking with a pastor friend of mine. I asked him, I said, listen, God is doing something massive in my life, something incredible in my heart. And I want to share it with you. And so we sat down, we talked, and I was so excited to share this with him. So I told him what I was doing. I was walking away from everything that would take me this way. And I was embracing what I felt like God was calling me into. But I'll never forget what he said. He said, why would you do that? Why would you set yourself up to fail like that? I simply said, I didn't. I set myself up to win because I burned the boats of everything else. I'm all in with God. I'll take $50 a week. I'm trying to marry someone. God will figure that out. I don't know what's ahead of me, but I know what God is stirring inside of me, and it starts right here at this church. And honestly, I don't need that negativity because I'm trying to embrace something bigger than myself. And so church, if I could just encourage you, there are things in your life that God is calling you to walk away from. There's a safety, there's a comfort in having this thing to run to, this thing to go back to. But I'm telling you right now, it's time to burn the boats. That's the heart of this series, is that it's time to walk away from the things that hold us back from what God is calling us into. And there are people, well-meaning people in your life who will tell you it's a perfectly good boat. Don't burn it. It's something safe to fall back on. Don't burn it. It's something good to settle down with. But what if God is calling you to light those boats up? What if God wants you to go all in and trust him with your life? Go all in and trust him with that crappy marriage. Go all in, and you may be 50, but it's time to go back to school, to go all in and say, I don't need a spouse to make a difference. It's time to be a foster parent. I don't know what God is calling you to burn in your life, but it's more important than those boats on the shores. It's more important than the safety of keeping them behind you, because they're holding you back from embracing what God has for you. I can hear you now. You're saying, but what will people think of me? It's crazy to do that. It's crazy. What will people think? Listen, people can't take the wind out of your sails if you burned the boats a long time ago on the shoreline. Are you with me? Go all in with God. Be unrelenting. Burn the boats. Shut down the haters. Go all in with Jesus, because I have a second title for the message, and it is simply this: Jesus plus nothing is everything. I'm telling you, church, don't come down here after service either and say, Pastor Kevin, I got nothing. I have no money, no prospects, no nothing. I have no way to start. Do you have Jesus? then you have everything. Go and watch him work for you. Stop waiting and start doing, church. Come on, are you with me, church? It is time. It is time to burn the boats of comfort, of living the American dream, of doing what everyone has told you you should want and should do with your life. And it's time to embrace the radical life that God calls us to live.